Okay, here we go. Chapter 27, Part 2. When the war was over, of course, all the marriages that had been postponed were now taking place. And there were even a lot of people who hadn't gotten married during the Depression because they couldn't afford it. So these couples, they can't find a place to live. Now, the Veterans Administration had been contacted by the federal government, and they were going to allow low interest home loans. But what good does it do to get a loan to buy a home if there's no homes to buy? Enter Mr. William Levitt. And there's a picture of what we call Levittown on the right. Very cookie cutter. He had built defense housing projects just during the war, and he came up with an idea of how to build thousands of homes and do it quickly. And a lot of it was prefab. At first, he starts off by buying land. He buys hundreds of acres in New York and also in Pennsylvania. Then he gets them all cleared off, and he brings in utilities, and he lays slabs, and he has carloads and carloads of materials brought in to build with. And he hired specialized workers. And the neat thing about it was each worker would one guy would be a roofer. That's all he'd do was put roofs on it. And he'd put a roof on one house, and as soon as he was finished with that house, he'd go to another house and put a roof on that house. Meanwhile, there's other people, there's plumbers, and there's electricians. Everybody had a specialty, and that's all they did. And they could get a house up in one day. And the government's back, and the VA and the FHA, the Federal Housing Association loans. And by 1951, more than 17,000 homes had been built. And by the end of the 1940s, it's beautiful. 55% of Americans owned their own homes. And when you watch the YouTube, you're going to be amazed. You could buy a new home for $10,000. But $10,000 was a lot of money. I mean, it was more than 1 year's salary because you were only making $2,000 or $3,000 a year. But with the low interest loans, you could buy it. And the YouTube will show you some different designs. They weren't all the same, but basically there was 4 designs, but they were all cookie cutter. And some of them, the only difference was a different color front door. Everybody had the same type of house, the same quarter-acre yard with a little bit of grass, the same fenced-in backyard with a barbecue grill and a swing set. And we're getting into the age of conformity. And what are the results of all this? Well, finally, the American dream to own a home has been realized, but it isolates the women because these things are not downtown. You see, there's no room to build houses in town, so you have to go outside the town. That's going to cause a problem. It's going to cause a massive migration from the cities into the suburbs or to the county. So women are isolated. They're out there with their kids, and it becomes the thing, trying to get all the women that were working back in the kitchen and the bedrooms. And of course, there's no benefit to African Americans because, though they're considered too risky to loan money to. And so the African Americans had to stay in the town, and we wound up with ghettos. And in the older neighborhoods, the government wasn't going to loan any money to fix them up. It's too risky to even invest in. So you've got these African Americans who had fought so faithfully in the war, and some of them just plain flat had enough. They start pushing for full citizenship rights so they could at least buy a home. Well, President Truman wanted to help. He really did. Even though he's from Missouri, he really wanted to help. We got a very strong segregationist and very conservative Congress. Like I say, he wanted to help, but he knew Congress was going to fight him tooth and nail, especially the Southerners. Then the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Shelley v. Kramer that realtors, they couldn't enforce this rule they had where they wouldn't sell or rent to minorities. It was unconstitutional, and this was great. And then all of a sudden in 1948, President Truman integrated the military. It didn't happen overnight, and there was some resistance to it, but getting into another, shall we say, military conflict in the 50s would increase the need for manpower. By the end of the 1940s, more than 7 million newly married couples were around. And of course, once they got married, they started having babies right and left. A big baby boom. And of course, those who had been postponing having children in the 30s during the Depression, now they have the babies. So we have this boom. And of course, then you've got the needs of the children, the play sets, the diapers, the bicycles, the strollers, the baby carriages, all the things that go with a baby. So of course, you have a boom in the baby market. Now watch the YouTube on Levittown and then go to part 3 of the lesson. Now I do not have a video on the babies. I figured we don't need listening crying babies. But if you stop and think about it, I bet your grandparents were of the baby boom generation.